Thanks for being here. Welcome back. You are back in the Senate race in a state that hasn't elected a Democrat to the post that you want in 12 years. So what's going to turn the tide in your favor this time around?
You know, people here are just, they want to fundamentally change who has power in this country. They want to take power back for themselves. Everyday Missourians just want to be able to decide how they get to live and have their, their senators and their members of Congress invest in them. We don't have that right now, and I just think, we're going around this state, we're having huge rallies everywhere. We had more than 500 people come out in Springfield the other day. We were down in Barnett, population 152, 200 people out there. It's just, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of excitement.
Presumably to win, you'd have to win over some Republican-leaning votes, right? And I've noticed in this campaign run, we talked in 2022 before the primaries, that you've been using your military rank, Lieutenant Colonel, more in campaign ads than you did in 2022. You've also publicly announced some support of former President Trump's policies, IVF policy being one of those. Why is that this time around?
Well, it's never been about left-right for me. It's been about taking care of places like the neighborhood I grew up in. It's why I joined the Marine Corps, and I think it's important that people understand that with me, they're getting someone who has a record of service. For me, it was in the military. And, I grew up in this working-class neighborhood in mid-Missouri, and it was an incredible place. My parents were paycheck to paycheck. They had 4 kids. And, at one point we went bankrupt because my little sister had to have these heart surgeries, and it's really hard on a family when you're paycheck to paycheck and something like that comes along. And I just, the reason we made it through that time is because the people in that neighborhood, they passed the plate at my mom's prayer group for us. They brought more food by the house than we could eat and really took care of us. So I spent my entire life trying to pay that back, and that's who I want to, take care of in the U.S. Senate.
To Democratic voters who vote Democratic every single time, who say, my candidate is aligning more with former President Trump, that could be troubling to them. What do you say to them?
Well, I don't think it's more or less. What I would say is I take no money from corporate PACs. I take no money from federal lobbyists. I take no money from big pharma executives. Like, the only people I will ever owe are everyday Missourians like those in my old neighborhood who took care of me when I was a kid. And so for me, that's what it's about. It's about bringing money back to this state. I actually admire our former Senator Roy Blunt. He brought about $300 million back to this state every single year his last few years in office, and it's a tragedy for me that Josh Hawley brings $0 back to this state every year in directed spending, and it's like, we can't afford 6 more years of that. Places like my old neighborhood are completely falling apart. As
the Democratic candidate, you are likely going to be asked by Senate leadership if elected to vote with the party in certain things. And you've told us before, even 2 years ago, that you don't want to go necessarily left or right, but in certain circumstances in the Senate, you might have to. How are you going to handle those situations?
Well, I don't think it's have to or not. I mean, it's my vote. It's a vote for the people of Missouri, right? Like, this is Missourians' vote, and I'm going to vote in their best interest. And so it's whatever I think is in Missouri's best interest I'm going to do. I'm going to take care of this state. I'm going to take care of the people here, because that's who took care of me and my family when we went bankrupt.
What's the #1 issue that you would like to tackle if you get to Washington?
It really is just fundamentally changing who has power and bringing money back to this state. It's why I don't take money from corporate PACs, no federal lobbyists, no big pharma and others. It's just, I'm tired of politicians from both parties taking money from these people and literally stripping our communities for parts. Like, if you go back to my neighborhood where everybody was able to take care of each other back in the day, like, first house I lived in is an empty lot. The one I joined the Marine Corps out of is boarded up to keep the squatters out. The store on the corner was shut down because it was robbed so many times it couldn't get insurance. And it's because our politicians, they sell out to these big corporations and other people and just let them strip our communities for parts. And so for me, it really is. It's about bringing money back to this state. It's about passing things like the Protecting the Right to Organize Act so that we can organize in our workplaces. We can have power against these big corporations and politicians who sell out to them.
You mentioned struggling neighborhoods. The economy is certainly top of mind right now. In polls, it's the #1 issue for Missouri voters. How do you plan to tackle higher prices, especially at the grocery store?
It should be a top issue. I mean, I'm telling you, like, my old neighborhood is falling apart, and it's because nobody takes care of us. And so one of the things you see at the grocery store is we have monopolists running the grocery markets. We have monopolists running our our agricultural industries. And what they do is they take the wealth from our land here in Missouri, they suck it up and out, they don't leave any wealth here in the state, they give it to their shareholders, and then they gouge us at the store. They violate Packers and Stockyards Act, many antitrust laws. I think we need to aggressively pursue them. We need to break these companies up so we can have small grocery stores again. Like, we used to have, I mentioned that old neighborhood, we used to have a little grocery store like a block from me, and of course it's gone, and you see that everywhere, food deserts, and it's because monopolists control everything. And once you have monopolists in control, they can name their price and we have to pay it.
Do you support the government getting involved when it comes to high prices at the grocery store and perhaps trying to set price limits, as some candidates have proposed?
You know, I believe in a free market, and for me, we don't have a free market right now. I don't think that's necessarily the way to fix the free market. I think the best way to fix the free market is to break up these big companies, you know, break up their supply chains and make it so that we have competition again and can force the prices back down that way. Because competition works, man. We just don't have it.
The back and forth between you and your Republican opponent, Senator Josh Hawley, has been especially heated. You could say notable. You know, he's tried to take you to task over your opposition that you've written essays on dependence on foreign oil and fossil fuels, working to say that somehow that makes you anti-farming. I'd like you to address that if you could.
Well, I mean, it's just a ridiculous stretch, right? What I want to do is make sure, you know, right now our energy is controlled by a cartel led by the Saudis, the Russians, and Venezuelans, and, you know, all these foreign entities. And so for me, like, I think we need to invest in the next generation of energy and manufacturing right here in the Midwest. I have a Marshall Plan for the Midwest to do that, to put us ahead in the next generation of energy, because my biggest worry is that in 50 years, instead of being reliant on the Saudis for you know, our energy, we're going to be relying on China because they're getting ahead in these investments. And, you know, Josh doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about our future. He just cares about sound bites. I mean, every single ad that he puts up on TV about me is just a lie and a falsehood. And it's like, you know, that's what I would do too, I guess, if I was him, and my record was not bringing money back to the state and robbing $250,000 from Missouri taxpayers for, you know, my own ethics violations. So I see why he's doing it, but it's sad that we're in that situation.
And we've seen in the ads and the billboards him suggesting that you were trying to shut farmers down necessarily. Moving from fossil fuels and foreign oil potentially would involve some sort of setup to help these farmers out, because, I mean, you have old tractors and rigs that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. How would you help them transition to this new energy age that you want?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm talking about is in 50, 70 years, I want us to have moved on. By then, the technology, if we invest in it here in America and we build it out here, they're going to have great technology and everything's going to work fine. I mean, again, he's lying and he's making stuff up because he doesn't have anything else. He also said I'd take away everybody's pickup truck keys on like day one in office, right? Like, that's crazy. I'm endorsed by the auto workers. I'm actually going to the UAW right after this, the people who make the F-150 right here in Missouri, right? It's just, you know, the guy doesn't have anything to run on, so he's just making stuff up.
Let's talk about immigration. You have called the situation on the southern border a train wreck in a recent debate.
Yep.
You've said in your ads that you would secure the border, and you say no matter who is the president. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I will work with any president to secure the border. And so, you know, when I graduated from school and I was looking for a way to pay back everybody who took care of my family as a kid, some of the guys who took care of me were veterans. You know, I really just admired them, so I became a U.S. Marine. And my first deployment was to Iraq. I led a police training team there, but before I was going to lead the police training team, I was scheduled to lead a border team. And so I have been to the southern border. I trained with the Border Patrol at the southern border as a U.S. Marine. I was certified by the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, and it's really sad to me to see Josh Hawley not want to solve this problem because he wants to keep it as a campaign issue. Like, the border is a train wreck, and there are simple solutions. In, catch, and release, stop the flow of fentanyl. Fentanyl's the #1 killer of people 44 and under right here in Missouri, and fully fund and equip Border Patrol. Josh Hawley's had multiple times that he's been able to do that, and he has said it's not his job. You know, in 2019, he voted against Roy Blunt's bill that Donald Trump signed to secure the border. A few years later, he voted against fentanyl scanner funding at the border, and then he voted against the recent bipartisan bill that the Border Patrol guys I trained with endorsed and supported because it was going to fully fund and equip them. It's just, you know, I'm a Marine. When I see a problem, I solve it and then move on to the next one. He wants to keep these problems, doesn't care about our safety because he wants it as a campaign issue.
Do you support an amnesty for people who have come over the border illegally?
No, and
What's your alternative?
Well, I mean, I think what we need to do is we need to find a path to citizenship for people like the Dreamers, you know, folks who were brought here as kids. I think people should be able to, you know, go through a background check, and as long as they clear that, they should be able to get citizenship. But it's not some sort of blanket amnesty. I mean, I think what we really need to do is, again, we need to fully fund and equip Border Patrol. We need to have more judges in immigration courts so that we can process this backlog and figure things out.
You mentioned that you wanted to fundamentally change who has power in this country, and you said that 2 years ago as well.
Yep.
You mentioned financial ties to politicians. What else would you want to change fundamentally about the system?
Well, I want to pass the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, because I think the only way that we have power in our workplaces is by having the ability to organize. And, you know, politicians like Josh Hawley, you know, they supported right to work. He has said that public servants who want to unionize are hostage takers, which is half of our union members in this country. And it's just, I mean, who's got more power than the government, right? Like, that's who you want to be able to organize against so that you can have power for everyday people. And it's just, you know, for me, I think we need to make it so we can all organize. I think that politicians take money from the wrong people. It's why I don't take it. I don't think politicians or federal judges should have stock portfolios at all, because I'm tired of seeing them make decisions based on their stock portfolios. And then the last thing goes back to what you were talking about on grocery bills. I think we need to enforce our antitrust laws. We need to aggressively enforce them. We need to break up these big companies that are essentially like have more power than the government in many situations, have more power than the people, so that we have competition in the marketplace again and we have a free economy.
You have mentioned the political system and changing that. You have yet to endorse a candidate at the top of the ticket for president. Why is that?
You know, for me, I got into this race for Missouri. It's all about bringing money back to this state. I want to make sure that when I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, I can work with anybody from any party, any president, to bring money back and to help everyday people. And so for me, like, I did not get into this race to decide who the president is, right? I didn't get into this race to decide for other people who they should vote for. I mean, it's my belief that Missourians are smart enough to make their own decisions. I saw that as a kid, and so I wanted them to be able to do that. And, you know, Josh Hawley wants to make it about the presidential election because he doesn't do anything for Missouri, and he'd much rather it be about that than him versus me.
I'll ask will you vote for Kamala Harris for president?
Again, like, that's basically the same question, man. And so it's just, I'm not in the race to decide who the president is.
All right, we'll leave it there.
Okay,
Lucas Kunce,
cool.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.